Shalom Aleichem, Rabbis. This is Yehud 11, and the program is 11 at 11, heard each and every Thursday night, Leil Shishi, from 11 to midnight on 620 AM radio WSNR. It can be seen on YouTube on our channel, LEVIN, the numeral 11, 11, 11. If you're too lazy for that, you can also key in rabbi.zone, and I think that takes you there as well, to the YouTube. And here, once again, with 98% of my brain tied behind the back of President Donald Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, our goodest Israel of America, Lubavitch, Satma, Lakewood, the Gedalim, the whole kit and caboodle, just to make it clear when I'm talking about Hashkafa 101 to 303, to make sure everybody understands it, I am your humble host. Once again, we have the privilege of having with us Rev. Nassim Leiter, who's an activist par excellence in upstate New York, but his net is Perusa. He's also dealing with Inyanim in New Jersey and morality as well, and has been a point man giving us up-to-date information about what's happening with the terrible, terrible gezeirus of Gias Bonus, which I say again and again. People have to use their powers of imagination, their powers of tziyur, of making a mind picture, a picture in one's mind, and being mitzayer, excuse the double entendre, the tsa'ar, that one of us would have if our daughters or our sisters or our granddaughters or people, cousins, or people we knew were forcefully conscripted, nashim, tzidkanias, benois chayil, women, were forcefully conscripted into the army or put in jail to pressure them to go into the army. So without further ado, Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Leiter. Baruch Hamaboim. Welcome.
Am I coming through?
Yes, I think you are. So tell me, Rabbi Leiter, what would you like to start with?
The situation in Eretz Yisrael fully demands our urgent attention. There are a few different aspects of what is happening there. Even if we just focus on Gias Bonus, beyond Gias Bonus there are quite a number of different attempts to essentially be Mabir al-Hadas, to draw Yidden away from Yiddishkeit in the variety of venues, be it academia or chinuch of young children or Gias Bonus. But my focus is Gias Bonus because I think that for us in Chutz La'aretz, that presents the greatest opportunity for success and therefore the greatest machayev for us to act.
Can I interrupt you for a second just to ask you this question? Before we get into the Gias Bonus, I saw an interesting video on the internet that was circulating. It was about somebody who's ostensibly some kind of a Haredi, a professor or something, and he has some kind of a funded organization. And the purpose of this is to bring more and more Haredim into the workforce and into academia. And in this video, I don't know if you've seen it or heard about it or know who I'm referring to. It was very blatant.
I did not get to see videos unless they're specially sent to me, emailed to me. But I think I'm familiar with what you're talking about. There are people that are funding organizations and efforts specifically to draw Yidden away from Yiddishkeit or away from traditional Yiddishkeit. Maybe they're not identifying it as drawing them away from Yiddishkeit, but there is a lot of money being poured into that.
But this person, this professor, was somebody who grew up as a Haredi, and then he went into academia. He was sitting there with a yarmulke and everything, and he was getting downright emotional and screaming and yelling, raising his voice and gesticulating wildly, gesturing and everything. And it was very, very clear from what he was saying, from his organization, that he is acknowledging that the more that the people become secularly educated, ostensibly in terms of parnasa, that's the goal of the Haredi person, to lift himself out of poverty or to attempt to be able to take care of his family. But the goal on the other side is very clearly to soften him up and to make him less religious and more worldly, etc. And I'm sorry to say it. It appears that they're being somewhat successful.
Well, yeah, they are. And there was an interesting article by a Chiloni. I'm not sure if he's a professor or some sort of professional in this field that identified a weakness in Haredi culture, which is that it is a culture rather than a religion as it should be. Meaning, there are those that are Haredim that are taking their Yiddishkeit seriously as a religion as they should, and there are those that take it more as a culture, and they understand that being a culture, it's vulnerable to change, particularly when it's gradual, and that's what they're trying to do. And to some extent, I would say that the Israeli government is sort of a mirror of our own weaknesses. They can hone in on where we're weak and focus on that. And if we look carefully at what they're doing, we can identify where we need chizuk. It's sort of like, if I may use the muscle, President Trump. Unlike his predecessor who occupied the White House in the previous 8 years of vacancy that we had, President Trump is responsive to pro-family pressure to some extent. But he looks exactly at what we really want and looks past what we pretend that we want. That's why he gives in substantially on religious freedom, because he knows that's what many pro-family people really care about. But as far as actual substantive issues of morality itself, particularly when it comes to, Mishkot Zohar To'eva, on that he sees that the pro-family movement as a whole is really weak, and we provide some sort of verbiage, but we don't really fight for that as it really makes a difference. And he can tell that very, very well. That's why he doesn't really give us much on that issue besides the lip service that we'd be satisfied with. So the Israeli government is very similar. When they release, let's say, someone from prison, they do it in a way that they're giving the Haredim what they feel that they really would be satisfied with without alleviating some of the fundamental problems. And the same here. Another point I should make regarding the Parnas issue is that they understand, the other side, the Sitra Achra, seems to understand very well the Rambam and Hilchos Avodah Zarah, Eric Beis, Halacha Beis and Gimel, that Lo Avodah Zarah Bavad which also li Parnas Acharel. It's not only Avodah Zarah proper that's also to turn after, but Elokol Machshavash, the Geremes Lo Odom Lakor Echad Mekrei Torah, Uzarm Onu Shelo Lahalo Salibeno, that we're also now to believe, but even to expose ourselves to any ideas that could lead to fear, that could lead to Avodah Zarah, even though they're in and of themselves not fear proper or Avodah Zarah proper. And in presenting what they consider to be training for entering the workplace, I understand, have a distinct emphasis on making a person be open to other ways of thinking. And that very stance of being open means not to accept Torah as objective emes, but to be open to other types of ideas that could lead to fear, if not be fear proper, but at least that could lead to fear. And that attitude of openness is deadly. And that's why it's effective. So I think they actually know what they're doing better than we do.
We're talking with Rev Nassim Leiter, and we're going to cover a wide gamut of subjects this evening. We're discussing in general in Eretz Yisrael the attitude now at this late stage in the developing culture. You were talking for a moment. We'll take a little side detour. You were mentioning about President Trump, and one of the things that I'm mentioning here is on various occasions is that Trump needs the religious people now more than ever. And now is the time to extract from him solid, concrete concessions that box him in, that he should have to produce those concessions now before the second election. Not to be told, yeah, we'll deal with that afterwards. But the feckless, spineless, capitulating, religio-conservative leadership of this country, whether it was with John McCain making kutchin you, muchin you with McCain, and not letting even Sarah Palin, who was far from perfect, but not mamish letting her discuss the moral issues, kihu zeh, during that campaign, or whether it was the second Obama campaign with Romney, where Romney was literally the father of homosexual marriage in the first state in the union that acceded to homosexual marriage, and it was signed by the Oisva of Romney, who is now a senator from Utah. He's a Mormon. And once again, the religio-cultural leaders sat there with Romney and there's books about this documenting, they didn't push the morality. And now with Trump is already, by comparison to McCain and Romney, is considered much better. And again, they're not doing anything. So what we have here is as follows. In Eretz Yisrael, where they moved the embassy to Jerusalem, I'm not going to get into the discussion of that, but the bottom line is that American representatives of the consulate marched in the Israel Mishkav Zocha parade, both in Tel Aviv and in Yerushalayim. This is coming from Pompeo and Trump, and this is in line with Trump's statement, just in honor of the so-called Akbar Lepume, the Pride Month, that in the 70 or so countries that do not have pro-Mishkav Zocha, or contraire, they're anti-Mishkav Zocha legally and certainly anti the marriage, that the Trump administration is going to make strenuous efforts to push that agenda, and they are doing that. And in Eretz Yisrael, they did give the Trump doing the good old Trumpian shuffle, one step forward, two steps back. They said that the only flag that could be raised by a consulate is the American flag, not any other flag. So they play a little game. They don't put up the rainbow flag, Lkwd, Mishkav Zocha Pride Month. What they do is they take a giant banner and they put it on the side of the building. So it's officially a banner and not a flag. Do you think that there's anybody or his uncle that says anything about this? The same people I mentioned last week who say nothing when Orthodox former assemblyman for close to 40 years, so 35, 36 years, Dov Heikind, who wants to remain relevant, issues statements condemning the Mishkav Zocha parade in Washington because they're pro-BDS and they feel that the Israeli government is oppressive. So while they allow Jews to march, they won't allow an Israeli flag to be held aloft in the homosexual parade. And this is what that typish ox fared. I don't know if he has dementia, Dov Heikind. This is what he's busy with. Having said, made that detour, now let's get back to actual the Gias Bana situation in the last week or two.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for those points. The Gias Bana situation, ever since, at least in my sense, has exacerbated in the past couple of weeks. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but if you recall, right after President Trump tweeted that tweets indicating his policy of the crusade for sodomy around the world, and sanctioning countries that oppose it in line with Noahide law. So right after that, Netanyahu, ostensibly a right winger, appointed Ohana, a Lkwd that's openly Mishkav Zochanik. He appointed him as none other than Justice Minister, at least in the interim. So I was just wondering if this was sort of a tit for tat, that right after there was a pronouncement about ensuring that laws around the world are brought in sync with the gay new order, that maybe through a bone or winked an eye or whatever, by appointing this terrible, horrible person to be the justice minister. But whatever the reason was, it seems like that since around then that law and order has increasingly dissolved among the people that are supposed to be enforcing the law. To the contrary, it's more crime enforcement than law enforcement in Israel when it comes to what's going on with regard to Gias Bonus and dealing with the demonstrations to stop the protesting. We have, in the past couple of weeks, we know of 4 girls last week that were in jail or almost in jail, 3 were in jail. One of those 4 remains. One of those 3 remains. There was one that was almost forced in jail. Maybe they made immediate spontaneous demonstrations that got out of the Lishkas Gias. And this week there were 3 new girls that were arrested that we know of. There could be several dozen that we do not know of. scattered around the country. We don't have any way of finding out. There's a lot of these girls just, the mikra, it's bashvacha, but it's not like a systematic method that we have of ensuring that we know, which girls are sitting and why. But in any case, there were 3 girls arrested this week. One of them was released, although not apparently granted a patur as she was led to believe. And I want to tell you something, and maybe I should say this up front. This mitzvah that really shocked me, that two of the girls that were arrested this past week, it was actually, I think, last Thursday, they were sisters. Their father is very ill. It's cancer, actually. They actually come from like a mixed Israeli-Sephardi Bukharian background, and they had some issues, which prevented them from being exempt. And they were collecting money in an area outside the coastal where actually they were allowed to be collecting, I understand, because of some sort of a hoax film that you're not allowed to collect money at the coastal. But so they were collecting for their father's medical care, which he desperately needed, which was Hatzos Nefashos, and which should really be exempt anyway, but not that you would expect that from the Israelis. But they were arrested outside the area. I understand in the area they're actually allowed to collect, but they didn't listen to the claims of the girls. And the girls were arrested, and they were treated horribly. They were treated in a very degrading, threatening manner, and they were emotionally tormented by treatment that they were getting. Initially, they didn't actually reveal their names because they knew that they would have issues with the army, and then somehow some Askin got involved, an Askin that works very much with the establishment, which is a big red light. And he prevailed upon the mother to identify her daughters to the police, of course, with the agreement that the police would not do anything to them, which they didn't. They delegated the riches to the military police, who picked them up immediately after they left the custody of the civilian police. And these girls were just having stayed over Shabbos a couple of days without giving their names, for not giving their names. They were held for no good reason. After that, they barely got even to speak with the mother before they were taken into military police custody, where they were apparently brutally mistreated, asked to move their clothing in a way that did not comport with sneers, and they just treated them horribly to the extent, and this I was shocked to hear this, but apparently this is true based on confirmation I received tonight. They both made the bracha on Kiddush Hashem. That means they were both at that stage where they were not only prepared to be most nefesh mamash, but they felt that it was imminent enough that they made the bracha on most nefesh on Kiddush Hashem.
Unbelievable.
And I found that shocking, not only because the Israelis would put them in a situation where they would feel that their lives are threatened if they refused to give up the Yiddishkeit, but that they would actually feel it was that imminent that they would have to make the bracha and be willing to do so. And I just feel that, in a sense, there's nothing that I can say that can add to that. But we have 2 girls, oldest is 24, the other one is like 21 or 20, that were literally holding by the most nefesh mamash in Israel, under the Israeli government, in the custody of the Israeli government, in the custody of crime enforcement, also known as law enforcement, military police. Something that would never happen in Iran or Saudi Arabia, to be arrested because they're not, going to the army. I mean, that's unheard of in these countries that supposedly the army is protecting us from, and they are to some extent, having fomented the problems that they're ostensibly solving. But that's a separate issue. I mean, this is happening in Israel, and it's being perpetrated by the army of the so-called Jewish state. I should say the military police of the so-called Jewish state. They were literally holding by, thinking that they might have to give up their lives, given the torment that they were being subject to. And there's a kunz here. You have to understand that they looked at this as minhag, the Jewish minhag, a small thing, which otherwise would be mutter, because under normal circumstances, you're only obligated to give up your lives. People are only obligated to give up their life not to commit one of the major tinaveris. Including fear, of course. But in a certain sense, where there's an attempt to draw you away from Yiddishkeit, which is exactly what's happening now in Israel, that changes the score. Then in that case, and I'm not going to sit here and pass it on the phone, but their perspective was that they're mechuyev to give up the lives, even to keep, minhagim or chumras, from what I understood from the writing, the transcription of remarks of the older girl.
So where are they now?
One was released without a tour, but released, and that's the younger one. Over here, the older one, Ora Chaya, is still in jail, languishing in prison. Now, it's a different situation. They were both, all three of the girls that were arrested this week after were all put in solitary confinement under excruciatingly difficult conditions. After the very feisty and even almost deadly protests, one was released totally. The other two were released from solitary prison confinement. Solitary confinement, but they were released into like an army camp, which is sort of a holding detention centers of sorts, which in a sense is worse than being in prison, in the sense that you have all these lowlives in the army floating around, and there's really very little protection that they have from illicit activity, according to my understanding. And especially given the fact that the Israeli government seems hell-bent on causing them to go against their religious principles, so even if there normally would be some level of protection, it seems that level of protection would be seriously compromised in their case. Now, Baruch Hashem, both these girls are apparently with each other in the same room, in this compound, but they're both in prison, and they're undergoing very, serious tribulations, tsaros. And at one point, the two sisters, when both sisters were in jail, again, they really thought that they would lose their lives by not giving up their religious practices and principles. So this is the situation that we're dealing with. And this is happening under our noses. And this is a machai for us to act. It says, b'chol nafsechem and lashon plural, that we have to give up our lives under these circumstances. And the Golem said specifically when it came to Giyas Bonus is that the drafting of girls is something we have to give up our lives for. It's not just the girls that have to give up their lives; it's everyone else that
well, I just want to say, I have something that I've initiated on the radio program. There's a pasuk that says Toilas Yaakov. A toilas is a worm, and the Chazal say that just like a toilas, it survives and its koyach is prepared with its mouth, so too Klal Yisrael's koyach is with their mouth. It's not with the Yadayim Yadei Esav. And, people say we can't do anything, we can't do this, we can't do that, we don't know, we're helpless. So tell me, you have a daughter that has to do a shidduch. You don't daven for her? The question is, if we even daven for these people, do we even bother to think by Ugalenu Gula Shleim Mehem Luman Shemecha, or when we say it Samach David Avdecha Meher Tzmiach Kil Yeshuascha Kivinu Kol Yom, we want the ultimate Yeshua, but we want Yeshua's process also. In other words, is there that much reyos? Is there that much arevim zelazeh? Do we hear any Rabbanim, Rosh Yeshivas, Gedolim, Rebbes even talking to us and telling us that we should have in mind? Many people know they have to have in mind the security of the inhabitants in Israel. So in some places after davening, they say a kapitel Tillim or 3 kapitel Tillim. But is there anybody anywhere who's telling us to daven for what's going on? Is Olam Kimin Hagei Nohog. The most important thing is actually what new type of sushi do they have in the local restaurant or the local takeout. That is what is occupying us. And here we've initiated what I call the V'lam Shinim Club. V'lam Shinim Club, the honorary member now is Simcha Felder. I call him There's No Simcha Felder, because he recently voted, and this was an article that appeared in the Jewish press, in the Culture Dispatches. Although, God forbid, the Jewish press did not have the spiritual testicular fortitude to write the fact that this constitutional amendment, which is like a super law, which I spoke about last week, it's like the basic law in Israel. It supersedes all other laws in the state. It's the highest level. And it was voted for by all 62 members of the state Senate. Now, if Simcha Felder would have voted against this bill and spoken on the floor of the Senate, there are some who believe that at least a handful of Republicans would have voted against this Equal Rights Amendment instead of making it literally unanimous. But the Jewish press couldn't even allow, not only wouldn't they mention Felder's name for this tremendous duplicity, for this betrayal, either from a lack of seichel, that he didn't read the bill. How you talking that somebody could be so many years a legislator and not know what ERA is about? Or worse than that, he read the bill and he's so miyuyish on his own political career or whatever the heck is going on with him, that he could vote in the affirmative for such a thing and not Shlach Chai V'Kayim. How could we want from Frankenstein Eichenstein that Ziditcheva Oisvorf? How could we expect from him, the newbie on the block, that he should stand up and make a Kiddush Hashem instead of voting for the homosexual bills that he did, which we'll discuss momentarily, if Simcha Felder, the senior statesman, is doing the same garbage? Now, this bill, as was brought out in the article in the Jewish press, it virtually gives a hechsha and it elevates the LGBTQRSTUV and every kind of word perversion to the very same level as a civil right, as a human right that a person has who is normal. And even though there's a little exemption there that they allow us a SOP, the yeshivas are allowed to still have their own segregated yeshivas, in other words, non-co-ed, but it specifically doesn't say that if some weirdo wants a kid wants a trans, and the parents want, or the kid identifies as a homosexual or a lesbian or whatever it is at any level of yeshiva, that there will be freedom of religion will trump this ERA that the Oisvarf Simcha Felder voted for. And I think that Eichenstein might have voted or whatever it is. I'm not sure exactly. I can't recall having a senior moment what's happening in the assembly. But I will say this, that Eichenstein and Felder both voted for hate crime statistic bills, and they which is to elevate Mishkevei Zocha. There was a vote. They both, at least one of them voted for that, and both of them voted for another bill, which dictates how all the municipal human rights committees and commissions, like in Wichita or in Rochester or in New York, that it spells out that they all have to take special consideration for the LGBTQRSTUV crowd. Plus, they have to appoint members from these groups, which I said last week, which means that they're mamish elevating this status. Then, and I mentioned this last week, but somebody asked me to mention it again. I don't know why. I think I was quite clear. We don't have to spend a lot of time on the rishus of this thing. That means that if there's a Jewish baker who doesn't want to bake a cake from Mishkevei Zocha, like the one in a Colorado guy who went all the way to the Supreme Court, who they're chepping him again and again in Colorado, it would mean that our people, just like the Flatbush restaurant on Avenue J, that folded like a cheap camera when the lesbian insisted with Flatbush Mama on making the New Year's party there, they'll obviously fold like cheap cameras in front of the Human Rights Commissions. And we should all thank Simcha Felder, no Simcha Felder, and no Simcha Eichenstein Frankenstein, with Bekesha and Ziditcheva Bekesha and Yichus and all, for making this tremendous Chil Hashem. Levin, why do you keep on mentioning Ziditchev for? You know why? I was just learning today something from Menashe HaKotten, Menashe Klein, the Ungvar Rov, and he goes into in great detail that a miyuchas in Klal Yisrael is on a whole different level than somebody who's ain't a miyuchas. There's big things in that. you're going and you're fasheming the Tshuva Einiklach. Now, before we come back to Rabbi Leiter, because I'm on a roll and I have a very weak memory, so I want to say as follows. In the Yated Nemon of June 19th, they have something called the Dunn Report. Dunn, I don't know if his name is Moshe Dunn, not Moshe Dunn. I forget what his Yochanan Dunn, right? Yochanan Dunn is probably named after the Yochanan. Maybe he was named after who was a former Stoner Rebbe. Yochanan Dunn is Meshich from a lot of the junk that is now journalists in so-called Haredi light, because there are no really almost no real Haredi, significant Haredi journalists. There's one Rabbi Birnbaum in the Yated, very few, and Dunn was from the better ones. Now, he recently moved from Hamadia to the Yated and to some other media. So he does an interview, get this, with Simcha Eichenstein Frankenstein, the Zidicheva nightmare. And why do I say this? Because I called him out on this. I spoke to the Eichenstein the night before he announced, and I called him out in the Jewish Press article, and everything that I'm saying is proving to be 100% true, and I take no joy in Mudsville on this. So Eichenstein says in a pasuk that's longer than Aseres Yemei Haman B'Neshima Achas, before I vote, before I eat, before I sleep, before I do anything, the most important thing as a legislature is to always make a Kiddush Hashem. And before I do anything, I'm always questioning myself whether I'm doing a Kiddush Hashem or not. And Dunn publishes this claptrap verbatim if he didn't even enhance the stupidity. Now, this brings to mind a Reader's Digest joke from the 1960s. The white man from Washington came out to the Indian reservation to see how the Indians were faring on the federal land set aside for them. And when he came out of his wagon or his Model T Ford automobile, all of the chiefs and the squaws and the braves were all standing there, all decked out in their Indian finery, and they were all waving their bows and arrows or ceremonial spears and screaming, "Huya, huya, huya, huya." And wherever he was going for the next few hours, everywhere they accompanied him, and he was so proud, they were saluting him like he figured, who knows what huya means in Apache language. They're probably saying, "I'm very ridiculous." He was very happy. As he's leaving the reservation, there is a large deposit of cow excrement. And the chief is about to escort him into his wagon or his car, and he tells him, "Please do not step in the huya." I'm Navin Yovin. Now, all I can say about Eichenstein, this Kiddush Hashem, the outrage of turning emes on its face mamish, all I can say is huya, huya, huya. And to Yochanan Dunn, I say you're between a rock and a hard place. Miman of Shach. If you were getting the emails that were sent to Hamadia from January when he became Eichenstein Frankenstein, the newbie assemblyman, and we were outlining the garbage, the votes that he was voting for, the things he was not speaking out for, the Mishkav Zachor and the abortion garbage, and you knew this, then it's a big avla. Assuming you didn't know it, if you're so gullible that you buy all Eichenstein stuff and don't bother when you're doing a kiss-up article, and you know there's so many pieces of gay schmutziger and abortion schmutziger legislation, and you don't bother to either research Huya, Frankenstein, Eichenstein, and to ask him any questions on it, and just write a puff piece, then I want to be done and done, D-U-N-N. I want to demand of Dunn that he has to fix up this thing, and I'm acting as his local shaita, nitna nevul shaita, and I'm your shaita, Yochanan Dunn. And why don't I call you up and say it privately, Rabbi Levin? Why don't you speak privately? What are you about schmutzing a guy like this? An ehrlicher stolen chassid. The answer is the garbage was done in public in Yated. The Chuvas HaMishkal, unfortunately, I don't have the amount of listeners that there are Yated readers. But I will believe Ned to call up Yated tomorrow if I find the time. And if not, I hope somebody else will call up the Yated and say Yochanan Dunn around 32 minutes into Levin's program, which can be heard on WSNR 620 AM radio and can be seen on YouTube. It's archived. You're Kaloin. I'm donning you, and I'm finding you guilty of sins of omission, commission. Either you're a sellout kiss-up, or you didn't do your homework. Either way, you're between a rock and a hard place. This is outrageous. What am I blasting done when there's so many Oiswaffen who are worse than him in Ami Magazine and Mishpacha, etc., etc.? How about that joker, Gilbert Clapper, whatever it is, who interviewed me for 20 minutes or so last week when I went to be supportive of Schwartz, who's suing the city of New York to allow him to provide reparative therapy through verbal counseling. And he interviewed me, and I stayed with him for 15, 20 minutes, and not one word appeared in the paper. Now, it could be because there was no room. I find it hard to believe, although the article was written in a page where there was advertisements right afterwards, so maybe he didn't want to get started with me. But I find it hard to believe because the person from the Jewish press who introduced me to Clapper said, here's Rabbi Levin, I'm sure you won't agree with him on even one thing. So if that's the case, then the Jewish press's slip is showing. And I can even bite the hand that feeds me. I appreciate what the Jewish press is doing, but I will not be silenced. When they do garbage, I will call them out on it as well. When they couldn't write anything about Felder, they couldn't even write by implication that all 62 people voted for it, so at least we would know that Felder voted for it. So they're guilty, and it's terrible. And that's what emboldens the Felders and the Eichensteins. There's no simcha by either one of them for us to do what they're doing. Back to you, Rabbi Leiter.
Yes, thank you for that very important background information on things people are not going to hear elsewhere other than this program. Okay, so getting back to the Giz bonus situation, we have to understand that if these girls are in the situation where they feel that the serious message may be imminent, that this is a scenario in which we have to act with the maximum capacity we can, which includes, of course, tefillah, as you say, but it includes piercing. Piercing is something we all can do in one way or another. Talking about it, getting in touch with other people who are in position to perhaps get the message out, just discussing this among chaverim, just between each other, figuring out ideas of what could be done. How could we get our world involved? How could we get some local Axkanim involved? Just work close to your own community, your own group, and try to figure out, who is there that would be interested and able to do something really productive and getting the word out, because the Israelis do respond to public pressure, and nowadays with social media, the technology, even a teenager could really whip up a PR storm if they're properly equipped. I'm not encouraging internet for kids, but I'm just observing the fact that a lot of them are in some sort of technological system whereby they can get out information relatively quickly. And there are some sites that have this information already posted, and mostly in Hebrew. Some of it's coming out in little by little in English, more lately. And we have to do what we can to alert the world to what Israel is doing, persecuting these girls. We have to emphasize, of course, that we oppose Giz bonus even for non-religious girls. Brisker Rav was even more opposed to drafting. In his time, he was even more opposed to drafting of non-religious girls than religious girls. In any case, Yehar Bayavor, and here they're going well beyond that. Not only drafting girls, they're going after religious girls in particular. There was Achlata from Mamshala, and about 7 years ago that there should be an increase specifically from religious communities, and we see that the number of religious girls that enlisted, whether it was willingly or being tricked or forced, shot up in the past 6 years, 2012 to 2018, it shot up from about 1,200 in 2012, which is a lot, huge number. And in 2018, it was 2,700. So that's an average increase of about 250 girls per year over the previous year on average. So this is a disaster. And things are just getting worse now. They're going, with these arrests in the past just a couple of weeks, ever since Ohio was appointed. Again, that might be a coincidence, although I highly doubt it. This is a disaster, and it's only happening because the Israelis know they can get away with it, because they know they have enough of the Haredi Shalom in their pocket.
Again, and the Yated and Ahmadiyya and Ami and Zman, whatever the media is, they don't touch it. The Jewish press, to their credit, puts in a few paragraphs about it in the Cultural Dispatch, but largely nobody's saying anything. I want to jump because I have to get in certain information during the hour. So I want to say that a few weeks ago we had Elliot Resnick, who's a tzaddik, the president, the editor-in-chief of the Jewish press. He was particularly bothered and came on to talk about the fact that the Transit Authority has on all the subways these outrageous advertisements for this museum of sex, and with very schmutzige advertisements that assault the sensibilities of thousands of students and thousands of men and women who have to travel on the subways. And I mentioned in an optimistic way that Reb Chaim Deutsch, l'chol ha'pochos, would get involved. Now, I just want to report to the Olam, I did leave a voice message for him, and he has not had the time, the courtesy, the interest, or whatever it is in responding. It could be an oversight. In the next few days, I will call his office. If he doesn't respond, then I will understand clearly that he's upset because I've had the audacity to make his voting record public, and therefore he's maybe not responding. Maybe I'm wrong, because until now, he's been a gentleman. He understands that I mean this, l'shem shamayim, and that he has to be brave enough to stand by his votes and what he's doing. But if not, we do have to do something about this thing, as Mr. Resnick pointed out. And if we can't get it from Chaim Deutsch, we're going to have to figure out other methodologies to get it. But it's really a tzara. Maybe we'll have to make a phone campaign to Agudas Yisrael of America, and by having 200 calls coming to them and their switchboard, they'll get the idea of going to the local politicians. They'll come down from their ivory towers to deal with a local issue. You understand? I just also want to mention in passing that while it's generally good that in Lakewood, Rabbanim came out and signed a gezeirus having to do with the type of music, goyish music, and singers who would dance, and different aspects of the Jewish music scene, chasnas in particular, and simchas in general. They did get into descriptions about the bass or the bass. It has to be this high, it has to be this low. But if you read it carefully, like a Medayek, it comes out that they didn't say in a straightforward way, in general, all music, goyish, non-goyish, bass, treble, controlato, virtolato, or whatever the terminologies are, the music is blasting and blaring. It's mamish hezek. Aside from Bechukas HaGoyim Leisei Lechu, it's an aping of the rock and roll of the Goyim. And therefore, it's sort of sad that once again we see the domino rabbis, even when they do something, it can't be done. If the Rav would have to be buying a house, he would make sure his lawyer does a very thorough title search and jot every T and across every T and jot every I. When you're making finally this late in the game, if the many people have suffered hearing losses and frumkeit losses because of the Jungle Bunny music that passes for Yiddish music at a chasna to be malava, chasna kala on the holiest night of their lives, when you're finally doing something, even that, any lawyer worth his or her salt could pick this apart. You could drive a truck through some of the things that were said here. So it's sad. In other words, what does this come from? This is another example of the fashtuptism that is pervasive, whether it's dealing with the Mishkav Zacher issue, whether it's dealing with the abortion issue, whether it's dealing with the forced gittin, the gittin ma'usa, and the Suffolk mamzeris, whether it's dealing with all kinds of kashrus issues, and on and on and on it goes. And it's about time to say that unfortunately, too often, when you analyze stuff, it's a bechin of the emperor has no clothes. And Hashem. In other words, they do 90% gewaltige Sachen for Klal Yisrael, but that 10% is killing us. I want to mention that tomorrow morning, and it's by you, you're going to be after the fact, because I'm taping this Wednesday night. Thursday morning, by the time you hear this, I will have been long over and done with. The Gentiles in Chabad Town, USA, otherwise known as Crown Heights, they are making a protest outside the library in Crown Heights on New York Avenue because there's going to be on Friday, I think, a drag queen story hour for the little Kindler. Now, of course, there's no such thing as a Lubavitcher kid going into a library, right? And there's no such thing that a Jewish irreligious kid is going, and the Lubavitch doesn't care about Jewish religious kids, right? That's not their big mitzvah called Kid of Rechekim. So therefore, to our embarrassment, Hashem has a sense of humor. He's rubbing our noses in it that we haven't seen Ad Hashor Azeis Limata Miasora Tvochim Ba'alma Didei Ba'alma Dehain. We haven't seen any Kol Kaira from the Lubavitchers that they should come out and join this protest. Now, in the last few hours, were putting out stuff on WhatsApp, and I made a bit of a parody, satirical video in my usual style, because if you make a simple one, you say, Rabbi Isai, please come out, we beg you, Kish Hashem, then everybody ignores it. But if you start putting on a Lubavitcher crushed hat, and you start to talk a certain way, and you show the hypocrisy, the biggest PR group that they pride themselves on PR, and they pride themselves at Rabbi Goldstein, who made a Kiddush Hashem and got his finger shot off in California, and he was invited to speak in the United Nations, but in their own backyard in Crown Heights, the Rebbe spoke in the famous Sicha on Purim against Mishkav Zocher, and that it's healable and everything else. So you're not even following your Rebbe. Make believe that tomorrow the Mishnah Thursday, the Halacha Yemis from the Rambam would be opposing Mishkav Zocher. Then maybe you would do something. So it's very disappointing, and I'm an equal opportunity abuser. And I find it interesting that we're going to go tomorrow morning in Crown Heights with the Gentiles, and tomorrow night at 8 o'clock at night, from 8 to 11, around when this, or maybe even to 12, while this program is airing, we might be finishing off a rally for Kedusha in front of the Lakewood Public Library, where the Rosh Yeshiva said, one of the Rosh Yeshivas was asked by Yitzchak K. So if we shouldn't go to Levin's protest, where, by the way, there'll be at least one pastor, one Galach there, and there will be Gentiles there, understand? And they will be asking, I hope, publicly, where are the rabbis and the Jews in densely populated Lakewood, New Jersey? But if Hashem, we're there, and the Lakewood Rosh Yeshiva, one of them, Zochel Latoiv, told Yitzchak K., an activist, he said, but Rebbe, we don't go to the protest, what should we do? He said, don't go to the protest. Why? Does he have a Messiah? Can he back it up in writing like I did with Moshe's letter, or Chaim HaKadosh, or the Debretzina's letter, or the Shambitz, or Rav Victor Miller's letter? Can he do anything? Does he have a Messiah? The answer is, of course, they don't have a Messiah on this. So I'm holding up now to the internet, to the YouTube, which we all have a headset for YouTube and all this stuff now, because, our Agudas Yisrael is all over the internet, tweeting away and kissing up and tweeting all kinds of Chanifah, Rishoyim, and everything else. So I'm holding up this sefer. It's called Beit Pesach L'Shvuos. I'm holding it up. It was written in around Tovshin Lamed Dalet. It was written by a big Ilui, a Gaon by the name of Cohen, who's written a dozen or more of such Sfarim. And this Cohen, Tzvi Cohen, was a Talmud in Ponevezh. Yeah, an Ilui. He has over 1,000 in-depth footnotes in it's Oyin V'Noira, the sefer. In the 400-page sefer, that's just one. He has 12 like this. This was before computers. So I'm holding up this letter from Rav Lezer Shlach, and I want to read you one sentence of this letter. The letter says as follows. The letter says, B'yoim Dalid, Yoim Ches, or hey, I'm sorry, Tezvav Sivan Tavshalon Dalid. Hinei im ki ein li chelik yad v'shem b'inyonim hanogeim l'maisa b'inyonim isa v'heta. V'ani Torah tomid b'inyonim hanulbedim b'yeshiva hakdesha. He Yeshiva's Ponevish. Okay? So you hear what the Godel Hadar from 2 days ago, Rav Lezer Shlach, to pass for him to say, Hatzachain. He didn't say, I'm not an expert in Uktzin. He didn't say, I'm not an expert in all the minutiae of Shaluach HaKain. He said, I'm not a mumcha in Isa V'heta, and the game Lemaisa. The humility is staggering. Mimenu nilmad. So tell me something. What makes the Lkwd Rosh Yeshivas and Rabbonim, who never had shimush from the Zikanim of the last door, what makes that they have a Messiah on how to deal with immorality and legislation? Where do they have it? And why won't they say anything b'ksav? That's the operative question. We now go back to Rabbi Nassim Leiter. Rabbi Leiter.
Okay. Just on that last point, I think that they sort of have an inverse Messiah from Rabbaran right there in Lakewood, because Rabbaran says the mission of Rabbaran in the first volume in the second Chalik of the Perek and Ozvav that the greatest threat to Yiddishkeit is not anti-Semitism, nor is it even assimilation. It's the Ziyuf HaTorah. Distortion of the Torah is the greatest threat to Yiddishkeit, and certain people in Lakewood seem to be pretty good at ensuring that truism continues till this day.
Well, you see that I want to interrupt for just a second to say I was mamish going to quote this famous Rav Aaron. The Messiah of Torah in the Shem of Torah is in a category all by itself. That's exactly what Eichenstein Frankenstein was doing, aided and abetted by the Yated, the holy peg of Pin Lifshitz. And I'm sorry that Yochanan Dunn has gone down several madregas, and he now has to do a Chuvas HaRambam, a Chuvas HaMishkal, for allowing this Ziyuf Shal HaTorah in the Mitzius. He's thinking about Kiddush Hashem. And with all due respect, if the Lakewood Rosh Yeshivas feel that it's appropriate to say Tillim, why didn't they say Tillim last year? What's different besides that Yehuda Levin is making a ruckus and coming down to make a thing with the Gentiles? And why are they sending Yisrael that he should go to Berdichev and L'chutz L'machne and make a little Tillim rally? By the way, we hope to say a capital or two of Tillim by our Kedusha rally. But if it's so important, why aren't the Rosh Yeshivas leading a Tillim saying in Lakewood, in BMG? So it's very, very sad. It's totally. But Rabbi Leiter, back to you on any other subjects you want to discuss in the remaining 5 or 6 minutes that we have.
Okay. So with regard to Israel again, so the situation is with the one girl that was released, even though that she was told or led to believe that she would be granted her patur without any further ado, when she came back with her mother today, or I guess it was yesterday by now, she was told that she had to undergo a tatsir dot, a religious test. And the purpose of the mother that contravenes the judgment that she was provided by an army officer upon her release, that it was met, of course, with disregard. So with her, they're playing games, and certainly with the other two, the situation is very serious with regard to the 27-year-old Baal Shuba, who had some issue going back about 9 years, and they want to give her a year prison for being AWOL, essentially, where she's clearly very religious, very heirloom, very firm. Her situation is quite dire. They apparently did not give her proper clothing, or they did not, when they took her, they did not let her take her clothing. They basically took her in pajamas, and she was forced to wear other things instead of clothing. And this is, I don't even want to go into the details on the radio because it's quite disgraceful. But this is what's happening in the so-called Jewish state, that someone cannot even have a modicum of the basic human right of clothing because these people want to promote an agenda. And we know that Chazal teach us that when there's no din, kashiyish din lamata, when Bezin acts properly and imposes law and order here in din milamala, there's no necessity for punish us. But when there is no judgment down here, when basically there's chaos, so then din milmala. There is, heaven sends down the din. And I just sometimes like to say a word that when the din comes down milmala in heaven, in Shemayim, they never miss. So that's something to bear in mind when people are worried about all these different threats that Israel faces, while Israel is confronted with threats from the south, serious threats from the north. At one point, there were 140,000 projectiles. They were worried about it. And I don't know what the bombings have done since then, but they were worried not too long ago about GPS-guided missiles, which would raise the threat level to a totally different plateau. And then, of course, the threat from the east, from Iran, particularly with some of the provocations, perhaps of certain Western powers. And now those are just the Gashmi threats that I'm talking about. And with all these threats, what are they busy with? They're busy with chasing down from girls that are demonstrably from and persecuting them, preventing them from eating demonstrably kosher food, and preventing them from wearing half-stick clothing. One of the girls was given clothing that was not even her size. It was too small. It was not sneezing. And this is what they're doing to break these girls down and to show that they're really not so religious, and to use that fact that they broke against them, and to say that you see from the fact that they compromised on the religion, of course, under pressure, and duress, obviously they're not religious, and therefore they don't deserve a patrol here, then they should be shoved into the army. Talk with secular people about what girls that they know endure in the army, particularly among the Eidot and Yisrael, the Sephardi community. The devastation that army life wreaks on these girls for life. They become broken people, and they, if they do start a family, there's all sorts of issues there that come up. This is what all these Haredim that are talking about preserving Yiddishkeit, that are being silent, this is what they're responsible for. Because the only reason that the Israeli government is doing what they're doing is because they know that they have a sizable part of the Haredi community that is willing to be silent as long as their people are being taken care of, as long as their people are being protected. Everyone else can drop dead, and that's what's happening.
It's your blood has to boil. It's beyond the outrage. And I want to say again and again, you mamish feel, a person mamish feels like cursing them out. I have a very mixed feeling, meaning President Trump. A part of me says that even though by far President Trump is the lesser of two evils, and who knows if Biden or Warren or some other Mishugana becomes president, who knows what they'll do. And that was the same cheshbon with Cuomo. But Cuomo was running, against lowlifes who were capitulating on the Mishkav Zachar and everything else. So the point that I guess that I'm making is there's a part of me that wouldn't care tremendously if Trump lost. Because if Trump lost, there would be a Kiddush Hashem of Laman Yishmu v'Yiro, that this is what happens when you compromise and when you do so much garbage on the morality issue and speak with such a forked tongue. And I'll tell you the same thing. The same thing I feel they're coming up with other elections in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, Medinas Yisrael. Maybe, despite all the garbage and despite all the stuff, maybe these people who are in power now, starting from Netanyahu and going down, maybe some of them should lose, and maybe that will be a shtickle, a lesson in V'nikdashti b'sei Klal Yisrael. I cannot feel like that. In other words, Ad Moshe, how much do we have to take from their garbage already?
It was observed that when the Haredi parties are in the government, there are no problems. When they're not in the government, they acknowledge that, yes, we have a problem with Yisdonim, academia, etc. But when they're part of the government, all of a sudden, all these problems seem to disappear. So that's a major reason that the Haredi party should not be in the government, unless, I'm talking when she doesn't, that they hold the being in the government, even when she doesn't. It's not worth it for them to be in the government if they're going to be sacrificing their principles for affordable housing.
Listen, Rabbi Leiter, we've reached the end of our hour. I want to thank you very much for joining with us, and we hope to hear from you again. And we catalog a lot of problems in the community. This is not a touchy-feely good program. This is Adrabah. This is not one of the Mikamcha Yisrael, and it's so great and everything is so wonderful. But we're talking about the warts, the underbelly, the worms under the rocks, because Mefarsim Lesachanfonim and V'makom She'eschil Hashem and Cholken Kavod L'Rav. And in the schus that we're talking like this I believe is Molamid schus on the door, that there are people who still have their heads screwed on straight and they haven't drunk the Kool-Aid. And we're trying, even biyadenu hakeyos, with our weakened hands, to do what we can, and hopefully HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be merafim on us, and we should soon see good things. Until we meet again, thank you very much, Rabbi Sai. This is Yehud 11, wishing you a good Tamid and spread the word.
Thank you.